When you hear the word intelligence, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably something like IQ tests, right? Or maybe fancy degrees. But what if the real clues are hiding in plain sight? What if they're in the small, automatic habits we have every single day? Well, that's what we're going to dig into. What psychology tells us about the patterns that truly reveal how we think, learn, and navigate the world.
Okay, we've all been there. You're in a conversation with someone, and they are speaking with absolute, unshakable certainty. They sound like an expert. But the more you listen, the more you realize it just doesn't add up. It's all confidence, but there's no actual logic holding it together. It's just loud.
Now, here's the fascinating part. Psychology suggests this isn't necessarily just plain old arrogance. It actually points to something much deeper, a set of what are called cognitive habits. You see, true intelligence isn't some fixed score you get on a test. It's revealed in how we process the world around us. So let's break down exactly what these habits look like. First up, we've got a huge barrier to any kind of intellectual growth, and that's cognitive rigidity. This is basically when the mind gets stuck in its ways. It's like it's locked in place and just can't adapt or change course, even when it's hit with brand new information. So what this really means is an inability to see the gray areas in life. For someone with this habit, the world is pretty much black and white. Something is either 100% right or 100% wrong. There's just no room for nuance, for complexity, or for that messy reality that most things aren't so simple. And this is where you can really see the difference in action. A rigid mindset, when it runs into a new idea that challenges what it already believes, it just shuts down. It dismisses it. Disagreements feel like personal attacks. But a flexible mindset, it gets curious. It sees complexity not as some kind of threat, but as a chance to actually understand the full picture. You know, this isn't a new idea at all. The philosopher Aristotle absolutely nailed it centuries ago. True intelligence isn't about believing everything you hear. It's about being able to consider an idea, to kind of try it on for size, without having to immediately accept it or reject it. That's what mental flexibility is all about. So, where does all this rigidity come from? Well, it often comes from something a little deeper, which leads us right into our second theme, the defensive mind. This is what happens when our own ego steps in and starts blocking logic, creating habits that literally stop us from learning anything. A perfect, almost textbook example of this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's not just about being overconfident. It's a genuine blind spot. People with very little skill in one area often think they're experts precisely because they don't have enough knowledge to even recognize how much they don't know. Man, this quote from Bertrand Russell just captures it perfectly, doesn't it? The wisest people out there are totally comfortable with doubt. They know there's this huge universe of things they don't understand. The Dunning-Kruger effect really explains why the people who know the least are often the ones who are the most certain. So, how does this defensive ego actually show up in real life? Well, you've probably seen it. It's the person who only listens so they can plan their reply, not to actually understand what you're saying. When they disagree, they might start attacking you personally instead of the idea. And admitting a mistake? Forget about it. That feels like a total failure. So they'll cling to being right no matter what. You know, there's a psychological term for this habit of constantly blaming others. It's called having an external locus of control. It's this core belief that life is controlled by outside forces. Bad luck, other people, the system. And if nothing is ever your fault, then you never have to reflect, you never have to adapt, and you never ever have to learn from your mistakes. It's a total roadblock to growth. Okay, so we've got rigidity and defensiveness. And what often fuels both of those? Well, that brings us to our third big theme, impulsive thinking. These are basically mental shortcuts our brain takes to avoid effort. The problem is, they usually lead us down the wrong path by putting our feelings ahead of logic. And this path of impulse, it can pull us in all sorts of directions. We might fall into what's called emotional reasoning, where the logic is basically, if I feel this way, it must be true. Or we might just follow the crowd, because hey, it feels a lot safer to agree with everyone than to think for ourselves. But there are a couple of others we're going to look at a bit closer. First up is magical thinking. Let's say you wear your lucky socks to a big meeting, and it goes really well. Your brain instantly connects the two things. It confuses a simple coincidence with cause and effect. Instead of analyzing all the real, complex reasons for your success, it's just easier to credit the socks. It gives you a sense of control, but it's really just a way to avoid the hard work of thinking logically. And then there's the big one, the siren call of instant gratification.
This is the habit of always choosing the quick, easy reward, like, scrolling on your phone for another hour instead of working on that big project. But real intelligence is about playing the long game. It's about having the discipline to delay that quick dopamine hit for a much bigger, more meaningful reward down the road.
All right, so after looking at all of these limiting habits, it might sound a little bit grim, but here's the good news. None of this is set in stone. We can absolutely choose to move from these automatic, unhelpful habits to a place of conscious awareness and growth. And that brings us to really the most important takeaway of all this. Intelligence isn't about what you know, it's about how you think. It's about your curiosity, your mental flexibility, and your willingness to grow. In fact, the simple act of becoming aware of your own thought patterns, that self-reflection, is an incredibly powerful form of intelligence all by itself. So, how do we actually do this? Well, we can boil it down to 3 really simple, actionable steps. First, practice self-awareness. Just take a moment to think about your thinking. Second, actively question your own certainty. Get comfortable with saying the words, "You know what? I might be wrong about this." And third, just cultivate curiosity. Get in the habit of asking why a lot more often, and don't just settle for the first easy answer you find. At the end of the day, the smartest people out there aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones who are most willing to be proven wrong. So that leaves all of us with one final, really important question to think about.